for an image, you could put that one little JPEG up there too, just in case it, that gives a little more of a placeholder for people to see when they first jump on.
Mm-hmm. Which JPEG would that be, Angie?
Well, I sent you too many emails, probably.
Perhaps so. I could find it quickly, probably.
It's not a big deal.
It looks like we're on live on YouTube.
Okay. Yes.
Very good.
I can see us up there, and I've got it muted so it doesn't conflict.
Greetings, anyone who's watching us. We're just going live on YouTube with the July 2020 Ballard District Council meeting. We're not quite beginning yet, but we will in just a minute.
All right, I just put a couple comments up there just so people know we'll be starting shortly.
Super.
And we received just a few questions from people beforehand, and I'll be checking email and things and the chat on YouTube just to see if any others come in while we're while the presentations are going.
Okay. Might as well be time, like 7 p.m. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brent Lackey. I'm the current president of the Ballard District Council. This is our second attempt at an online Zoom style Ballard District Council meeting. Hopefully all the technical things are going to work out just fine. We've tried to test drive and get online early and do all that kind of stuff so that it'll work well. Tonight's program, we were hoping to have a number of development proposals in downtown Ballard, specifically some projects that are underway on Market Street. Unfortunately, we had a few folks who we were hoping might be able to participate in the end couldn't join us for a July meeting. So we're looking at perhaps scheduling a part 2 of this meeting where we hear from some other developers. I note for the collective good of Ballard and the neighborhoods around it that in doing research on Seattle Department of Construction Inspection and Planning office websites and development databases, that there seem to be no fewer than about 7 to 10 5 to 8 story buildings proposed currently on Market Street, totaling somewhere on the order of 1,000 new units of housing and mixed use commercial development going on just right on Market Street. And that doesn't even include streets behind and below Market. So we're obviously still anticipating a gigantic amount of urban growth in Ballard and right in downtown Ballard. So we thought we'd try and address that a little bit tonight with a presentation from a couple of folks who are representing some developments that are underway there on Market Street. And then a chance to hear a little bit from our recently elected District 6 council member, who happens to also be the new chair of the Planning and Land Use Committee, Dan Strauss. So Dan's going to join us, talk a little bit about the role of the city council and his committee in some of this planning and urban growth in Ballard. So I think with that as an introduction, I'm just going to start right into a couple of presentations from a couple of different folks representing developments in Ballard. First with us is Bryan Ziegler, who's with the Aegis Living company. He's going to tell us about work they're doing on the east end of Market, just east of downtown. Take it away, Bryan.
All right.
I'm going to actually
thank you very much.
Make a presentation, so I'm sorry to interrupt y'all. Go ahead and try and hand you the controller and make you the host, and then you can just go ahead and share your screen with us.
Okay. I was going to share my screen here, so you just hit the little button.
You see a green share screen button. You should be able to push that. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Can you see this?
I see you sharing. Yes, we do.
Oh, good. Very good. So again, Bryan Ziegler with Aegis Senior Communities. I'm getting a little feedback, so I'll do my best. But so Aegis Senior Communities, we've purchased the parcels, the 4 single-family parcels that are located at the southeast corner of Market Street and 11th Avenue West. It was part of the HALA upzoning, so they were previously 4 single-family residential units that'll be there for the next year or so, and then we'll be into construction next summer. Just a little bit about Aegis. What we're proposing for the site is an assisted living and memory care community. It's about 92 units at this time. The assisted living and memory care are folks that need assistance with daily activities. So people that don't really drive, but they need care with eating and with bathing, clothing, that kind of thing, memory care. We do have staff that will be on site in 3 different shifts. So there'll be employment of about 80 different 80 different people and about 40 different job titles. So quite a diverse range of employees at the site. A little bit about the building itself is that it'll be about 5 stories tall. It's going to have underground parking. Parking is not required in the area, but we have staff that'll need parking. We have visitors and that, so we will be providing underground parking, 39 spaces for the building. Let's see here. So here's a little bit more about the site. Again, right on Market Street, there's a bus stop right out front, high frequency service. Aegis also compensates employees to take rapid transit and things. So we're trying to encourage people not to be taking the car. And this is well situated urban location. This is the site, a little bit more detail. You can see the single family houses that are there now. It's about 20,000 square foot total. Main things about it is that we'll be taking access off of 11th Ave towards the back of the site here. That's with the vehicles. The pedestrians will be taking access off of Market Street, creating a formal entry off of the market. There's existing mature trees on site that we'll be preserving. Well, they're actually off site, they're in the public right of way, but we'll be preserving those. And as a matter of fact, we're going to be stepping the building back at level 2 so that we can preserve that tree canopy that's out there and do the best we can to keep that as most canopy as possible and respect the trees. So let's push on here. We have this is the zoning, as you all know, that's been upzoned. This is part of the upzone. As part of that, just to note, we'll be contributing about $1.6 million towards affordable housing as part of the HALA upzone. This is a M2. That means we bump 2 different zones and has a little higher contribution rate than typical. But this image right here shows kind of the design direction that we're taking a look at for the building itself. And that we want to, with all of our buildings that we just, that you've seen in Queen Anne and Madison Park and Mercer Island that we're doing, we try to reflect the character of the community that it goes into. We met with the community in the early design guidance process and also our own thoughts on it. And they kind of merged pretty well in that we're trying to honor the fishing industry of the area. We're honoring the Scandinavian history of the area. We like to do buildings that have kind of a residential quality and a very evocative and memorable architecture, not necessarily modern, but more of a reflection of heritage. And so the idea that we came up with was cannery. And there's a lot of large buildings that have simple forms, great color, good punch, very memorable, and it's based on that cannery form. So we went to the EDG meeting. I don't know if this is all here, but we went to EDG and met with the city on that, and then went through the public hearings and presented this as our first concept of the building itself. And as you can see, it's got the massing at the bottom is about 2 stories facing on the market. It's brick, the red brick that's reflective of the Ballard area. It does step back at level 2. The existing trees will kind of hang over that area. It's got red board and bat with a metal background that's that lighter color, trying to make a strong corner statement because that's the most visible part of the site is the corner of 11th and Market. And then a lot of detailing. You notice in our buildings that we like oversized lights. We really get into the details on rafters and the wood trim around the windows. And we really like to emphasize the details on the buildings. For instance, even that hook that's coming out the corner on the top is something that you would see on an old cannery building, and we want to replicate that as well. After meeting with the city at EDG, their comments were that our building was a little too busy. They wanted it smoothed out a little bit. And so we are now into the MUP process. After revising it to the comments that we received from the city, they wanted to tone down the roof lines and tone down the corner a little bit and calm the front of the building. And so this is what we just submitted for MUP. And it's still an attractive building, same material palettes and things that we had pursued originally. And again, the detailing and things will be really emphasized on it. I think it's not a done deal yet as far as design review. We have another round of that coming up in probably November, December. I think we're going to ask again for the roof line to be a little bit more articulated in that, but it's getting there. It's to the this is where we are in the MUP level. And so there's one more round of design review. Like I said, there'll be a public meeting in hopefully November, that time period. Hopefully break ground in next summer and be open for business in summer of 2023. I don't have anything to add to that. Do you have any questions or anything?
Yeah, that's terrific, Brian. Thank you. So a couple of questions, and then we'll try and filter questions from our audience as they come in too, which probably happen more at the end of a series of presentations. But I had a couple of questions. One is, did the MUP review lead to the setback at the top reducing?
No, the setback at the top, the levels 4 and 5 are set back in the front because there's high voltage power lines, and they have a 14-foot radius from the closest line. And so that wants to set back anyways. Level 3, we could have projected out to the property line, and we pushed that level back to be in alignment with 4 and 5. We give it a 2-story appearance along the front right of way.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
What kind of direction did you hear from the community or public participants sort of before or after the MUP review process?
Yeah, so we just submitted for MUP, but as part of the design review, the early design review, we heard honor the Scandinavian heritage, honor the fishing heritage, go bold with colors. We heard that there wasn't a high degree of satisfaction, at least in the group that met with us, as far as the modernism of the buildings going on in Ballard. They wanted something a little more historic, which is right up our alley. We like to create environments where the seniors have kind of familiarity, and it's the modern buildings, I think, are wonderful for a whole different segment of the population, but our segment seems to appreciate a little more familiar forms, materials, colors. And so that's what we're trying to do with this building.
Excellent. Okay, great. It looks exciting. One question also I had is just thinking about Market Street and how busy Market doesn't look so busy in the rendering there, but I know that Market down there is kind of in a, let's call it a faster than slower section of Market.
It is, yeah.
Is there what are the thoughts, or how do you sort of interface with traffic and crossing the street, that kind of thing?
Well, our residents are a little higher acuity, and it's if they leave the building, it's with family or it would be with staff. And I certainly don't see them crossing Market Street accompanied. There's, if anywhere, they would head to the park that's on the south side. But we also provide, there'll be a rooftop deck on this that will be fully amenitized. The entire first floor is activity center, movie theaters, a pub. It's got the dining room, bistro, hair salon, pedicure, manicure, everything that they need is right. We bring the commercial to them. We also have a service where we take them into town if they need to do something. We have a shuttle service in that, so they can get around that way. But it's not something that they would be leaving the building unaccompanied, especially crossing Market Street. Yeah.
Okay. And remind me one more time, how many residents?
93. There'll be 93 apartments.
Okay, 93 apartments. Great. Well, thanks very much. I'm going to have you stay on. I'm going to reclaim the host, and then I'm going to introduce Frank Stiegl. Hi, Frank.
Hello.
Frank is with Carmel Partners, who have been working, I believe, on the project called the Ballard Yards. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, down right at 2417 Market, right off the southwest corner of Market, where folks have already been seeing a lot of development underway. I'll let you take it away, Frank.
All right, great. So I'm showing that I'm disabled as far as participant screen
Let's
sharing.
try again. I'm trying to make you the host.
Okay.
Now try it.
Well, let's pull this up. I don't know.
Now
Can you see that?
Not yet, but
Okay.
soon. Let's see if I can stop Brian's screen sharing. I think.
Well, he needs to release the screen.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Now you should be the host.
There we go.
Now you should be able to, I forgot to tell him to turn his screen share off right there at the end.
Okay, so thanks. Yeah, my name is Frank Stiegl. I'm with Carmel Partners, and we're developing an apartment community. If you all can see the map, it's, Brent said, located at the southwest corner of 24th and Northwest Market. Blow that up just a little bit. So you can see this was the old, it's sort of a mid-block site. And it's where the old Ballard Transfer Moving Company was located. And it's right across Northwest 54th from a lot of the marine industrial businesses, Packfish, Pacific Fisherman Supply, Ballard Oil, Brett Snow's boat building company, and just one block east of the new Nordic Heritage Museum. So I know everybody's aware there's been a ton of work on Northwest Market going on, in a lot of it related to the Burt Gilman Trail and the section that goes along Northwest Market, right in front of the museum and our property. That's subsiding somewhat, and we're actually just starting on our project. So let me pull up my other presentation here. Now that you know where the location is, you know, much like Brian was saying, we've a little further in the process. We started this 2.5 years ago. So we've been through the design guidance meetings and the design review board meetings, and had our MUP issued at the very beginning of this year, after about 2.5 years of work on entitlements. And a lot of the same sort of considerations or requests were made, I think, when we were doing our design, and was having some sort of reference or reverence to the marine industrial business to the south of us, but then having sort of a different face that looks out onto Market and provided some you know, common space for interaction with the public and not just for the private use of the residents. So we went through a few different massing studies, came up with this plan, which has a courtyard that opens up onto Market Street. And this is a pedestrian overlay zone. So there's retail, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but retail sort of flanking each side of the courtyard. And On this side, again, this was in the prior zoning before the Hall zoning, so this was limited to, we have 5 stories over, or 4 residential stories over retail on Market Street, and then because there's a slope, the site drops off considerably as you go to the south. There's actually 7 levels on the south side, and I'll have a rendering of that that you can see. So we are very happy to have started construction just a few weeks ago. Actually, we had all of our permits and were able to close our construction loan and have commenced work. So those of you that may have gone by the site, the building is no longer there. So we've done the demolition and are beginning our shoring work, and we expect to have the project completed by April of 2022. Go to the next slide here. So this is what the project will have. It's 171 apartments, predominantly 1 bedroom, 1 bath apartment units, with a few studios and a few 2-bedroom units. There are 98 parking stalls. Those are all accessed not from Market Street, but from 54th to the south. And then tons of bike parking, that's a city requirement. And then a full complement of amenities, a rooftop deck, fitness center, lounge, a bike wash, pet wash, and then a pet relief area on the roof. And then the retail, we have about 6,400 square feet of retail that's currently divided in the 4 different suites, all along Northwest Market. What they can do with renderings these days is amazing, but it almost looks like it's already built. But this is a closer view of what the courtyard's going to look like. You know, we have brick base, a lot like Bryan's project, and then up above it's either cementous siding or metal, large windows. And again, this is the view of the entry right in the middle, and then there's retail on either side. So just a few steps down here, and there's a ADA path of travel to the right of this. But this is pretty much what it's going to look like. There's another perspective of the building. It gives a little more context. Again, looking, that's Northwest Market. That isn't the final configuration of the street. And there will be a center turn lane now, and then single lanes either way with a dedicated turn going eastbound on Market onto Shell Shoal past our project. So there will be street parking right in front of the building. And then once you get just past the building as you're heading east, there'll be a dedicated right-hand turn for those that are going on to Shell Shoal. You can see, you know, we'll have a rooftop deck. We have some PV solar photovoltaic panels up there. This
Frank,
is,
does the bike path stay there then the way it's shown in the rendering?
that's the plan. Yeah.
That's the current missing link plan, right? It goes around there.
Right. Yeah. As everybody knows, there's been a lot of debate on that. But it's at one point, you know, they wanted it to go on 54th to the south of this. Mm-hmm. But that's currently on Market Street.
Does the approach you're taking prohibit that change at all, or how would that be affected by either way?
This is pretty much done, cast in stone. You know, no, they could still do it. We're not occupying any right of way with our building. So if I remote chance it shifted back to 54th, I don't think that would be an issue, but I think that's highly unlikely at this stage.
Yep. Agreed. Thank you.
This is not as good of a rendering, but kind of a glimpse of the south side. So that would be 54th Street. We'll be, if anybody's driven down that road, it's pretty rough, but we'll be improving it. We'll have a new sidewalk and curb landscaping. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, there was just someone in the background.
Oh, okay.
Another council member, but.
Got it. And there's the parking entry. So there's 98 parking stalls. There's sort of 2 levels of parking, but it's all access from Northwest 54th Street. And then this is a glimpse of the rooftop deck, fairly modest rooftop deck, but it will have obviously great views of Salmon Bay to the south. This is what our rendering of our fitness center. Rendering of our lounge. And our typical unit finish. So Carmel builds we think a pretty high quality apartment home. I didn't really share much about us, but we build nationally. I'm local. I've worked on several projects in Ballard over the years, including Ballard and Ballard Place condominiums. My mom lives in Ballard. So I'm part of the community, but I work for a company that is based in California, and we build our own projects. We're the developer, but we're also a general contractor. So that way we are able to maintain high quality in the projects we develop. This is another view of the unit finish and what our bathrooms will look like. This is just a rundown on for those that might be interested in leasing. I know that's retail is a very tough business to be in these days, especially for restaurants, but we have sort of developed this space, and hopefully by the time we are delivering it in 22 months, that the market will have improved. And I can make this available, I suppose, or something on the website if that.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'd be happy to put a link and post a PDF of that for you.
Yeah, but again, there's four different retail spaces. Those are the various sizes. One is already sort of equipped to accommodate a restaurant if that ends up happening. And we've done a lot of mixed-use projects, so we're pretty familiar with what retail is going to need. And then these are just individual suites with the areas. I won't spend a lot of time on them, but they'll be in the package. We're hoping to have ideally we would have a restaurant and a coffee shop, yet another coffee shop in the building. And then the other would be more typical just straight retail, either service oriented or shop space. Mm-hmm. And there's a potential restaurant layout for that. That would be on the easterly most retail space. So that's where we are. Again, we're underway and been through all of the entitlement process and worked closely. I think like Bryan said, that there wasn't a ton of broad public input on the project. We certainly work closely with the marine industrial businesses and have a good relationship with them. Tried to address some of their concerns related to traffic and things. But we're very, very proud of the design and very excited to deliver this project in less than a couple of years. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Clearly a handsome building and clearly an indication of just how much of a big city we're getting in downtown Ballard very quickly. Is it it's all apartment buildings, apartment units, and you're not planning on any condominium or selling units?
No, strictly, and it's market rate. This again was before the hollow zoning, so it's all rental.
Right.
Yeah.
Thinking about it then being as all apartment dwellers, probably how many parking is there? There's some parking below. You said how much?
98 stalls. Yeah.
98 stalls. So just wondering, thinking a lot about travel and traffic issues right around there. Is there any kind of a pedestrian loading zone or a residential kind of pull out sort of place? Is that just in the back? Just wondering what I'm imagining is going to be a stream of Ubers and Lyfts pulling in there to take and drop people all the time, how they're going to work.
I'm going to find my the back portion. So yeah, as far as those that are getting Uber and Lyft, the way this street, we're have asked the city for a load zone in front of the property. Yeah, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but we petitioned for that, so there can be pull-off space. It's not going to obstruct traffic. Again, this is going to be parking.
So instead of a vegetated divider like it shows in the rendering, there's actually a strip of just parking there? Yeah,
it's just striped. There won't be any hard barrier between that parking and the street.
Okay.
So it's just curbside parking along there until
part of that, if your petition succeeds, part of that would just be like a white zone or a yellow zone.
Correct. Yeah, and then all the other vehicle traffic going to the garage is coming in off of 54th.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you had much to sort of, how do I say this? Has there been any challenge with, or is there any sort of logistical issue with the huge amount of construction going on immediately kind of to your south with the Ship Canal Water Quality Project at the same time? How's that?
No, we haven't. It will get busy. The biggest issue will be when we're doing our excavation and having to pull out soil. But we have, obviously, there's a lot of coordination with the city, which is also coordinating with other nearby projects. So we file a transportation management plan, or when we have our haul routes and everything like that. We're also fortunate in that we were able to lease some space from Pacific Fishermen adjacent to this to allow for staging and some of our other equipment. So we won't be burdening this street as much as you would normally have to if you didn't have access to those lay down yards. So that has worked out, and everybody's been very cooperative.
That's good. You mentioned the haul routes. Is the primary haul route for all the heavy excavation going in and out of Shill Shoal down the street, or how are you sharing the same haul route with SPU?
A lot of it is actually going to go down Northwest 54th. So this 26 now has become southbound only. Mm-hmm. Right. This is still a two-way 24th, and then our route is probably going to be actually in here or in on 26 to the site, but then traveling west down Northwest 54th and taking a right on 28th, and then getting onto Market and hauling that way.
Okay, and then straight out you go. Do you take a right then onto Shill Shoal with most of your?
I think that's a plan, Brent. I'm not sure exactly, but yeah, I think that's the route that they would go.
Rather than go through downtown Ballard, which ostensibly is going to be getting repaved at the same exact time.
Right, yeah.
Well, it's going to be really fun to try and drive around downtown there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to let you stop the sharing. I'm going to reclaim the hosting. And I'm going to, there we go. And I'm going to welcome Councilmember Dan Strauss. You hear me all right, Dan?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just fine.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us.
Do you mind if I just interject quickly? We have had just a few questions coming in. So if our two development speakers can just hang around, I'd love to pose those after Councilmember Strauss is done.
Yeah, and even before you got to do that, I was going to try and introduce you to Angie because I felt you in that earlier. I just left you over smiling in the corner. Angie Gerald is our Vice President of Ballard Council, and she's also been helping last time and this time sort of with the very complex task of juggling questions coming from various technologies. into the live stream. So thank you for
Great. So I'll
that.
just bring those up later.
And yeah, I'll plan to just bring Brian and Frank back onto the Zoom call video here when we go to questions kind of for any and all. Dan, I really appreciate you joining us. I realize you guys, the city council, the new council had its first public budget hearing just this evening, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, and so making time for us right after having to hear all that, and I'm sure a lot of concern about how it's going to work in the budget with two major kinds of crises going on globally as well as locally.
I think I've counted a couple more than just two, but
Yeah, well, yeah,
conservatively.
certainly there's some ones that are preeminent historically right now. So, but I'm going to try and give you, I guess, a little break from some of those things and just talk about the sort of challenges of what we hope won't be true crises with regard to all these gigantic buildings we're getting in downtown Ballard. It's been coming. It's been happening for a long time. I don't think anybody's surprised to see it, but I think we all still sort of whelm at how much more growth is happening right along Market Street and in, just in the sort of first half of this decade that we just started. So I just kind of want to hear a little bit from you. I think about helping us all, citizens, neighbors, organizations, understand a little bit from your perspective, kind of what are the council's role in some of the development and planning activities versus some of the executive / mayor side work, and what happens at construction inspection, what happens at the planning department, et cetera. But as the chair of the Land Use and Planning Committee, is that the right name for the committee right now?
It's now Land Use and Neighborhoods.
Land Use and Neighborhoods.
It was important for me to keep the Department of Neighborhoods connected in the same committee as the Land Use Committee.
Yeah, amen. I think you'll all find us very much in agreement with that. And so in light of that, we're really wondering, how are we going to work with you to sort of absorb all this rampant urban growth with as little negative impact that we can sort of somehow find? What's your vision for how your committee and council can try and help us do that? We're wondering, how you're going to approach trying to provide some of the critical infrastructure needs, if there are ones that you see as being sort of different than what we have now, which, like I said, it's feeling like if we stop downtown Market to repave the thing at the same time that we're building the biggest public infrastructure project in the history of the city on Schill at the same time that we're building at least 5 skyscrapers, more or less, right there on Market Street. It's going to be interesting to try and accommodate the infrastructure needs. And I guess then turning towards neighborhoods, what's the role of the Department of Neighborhoods in all this? And, how are Ballardites going to get most effectively engaged in this process so that we try to steer it to a way that, has some community role beyond just giving the input through the kind of master use permit process. So I realize that's a whole bunch of questions. I don't expect you to answer them as if this were an exam 1 through 8, but that's the kind of theme of what I'm hoping we're going to hear you think about a little bit.
I appreciate that, Brent. And I've also got my team member, Noah, on the call. He's a subject matter expert in all of this. I'll just briefly start by sharing with the group something that I've shared before, which is that I was born and raised here in Ballard. I currently live in downtown Ballard. One of the reasons why I stuck to run is not seeing infrastructure needs built out commensurate with the growth that we've been experiencing, and we need to have strong leadership in that area. My role as a council member here is to guide and set parameters for growth and development rather than to influence or review specific projects. Once a project is in the permitting process, it is usually beyond my immediate control, and that there is good reason for that in past experiences where officials can have influence on permitted projects. There's been a lot of daylighting and ensuring that ethics are maintained in the way that buildings are permitted and designed. I'll take a step back and just share that it has been a really emotional experience watching the neighborhood that I grew up in bulldozed. It's a situation where I can truly never go home, even though I still live in the same neighborhood I grew up in. And also the density in Ballard is why we have such a vibrant downtown core. Ballard is lucky because we were founded as our own city. So we had the opportunity to create a street grid that worked rather than Seattle, who had another different experience with creating a street grid. I also recommend Thompson and Casey. They have really great historical presentations that you can feature here on the Ballard District Council. They go from pre-European all the way to today. And I think Arnie spent about $3,000 on photos from Mohi. But I'll take a step back again to when Ballard was its own city. We were the second largest city in King County, city in the state of Washington. And because we had our own way of setting up how our city worked, this is why Seattle is so walkable. It's why the long blocks run east to west below 65th. And then once you get above 65th, the long blocks are north and south. There was a cow ordinance of the early days where if a farmer's cows came south of 65th, they could be ticketed. Things have changed. We also have a really unique strength in Ballard. We have the economic advantage of being the closest freshwater port to the Gulf of Alaska. It's got the ability to provide full service to fishing vessels this side of the ship canal. The industrial and maritime district provides, in my opinion, a very positive tension between the commercial core and the working waterfront. I think Ballard Yard, as you saw, will benefit immensely from this. Ballard Yard is the type of building that will also benefit our community with their commercial space, solar, bike parking, and their connection to the maritime community. 54th Street behind it is Frank. Yeah, as Frank was saying, is one of the roughest roads in the neighborhood. I've always had fun taking tourists down there, and things change. I'd say having that bike trail in front of their building will connect people to the places that they want to go, especially with local bike companies like Rad Powered Bikes creating electric bikes that really will change the way we navigate our city. Ballard Yard, as you said, is also kitty corner to where kitchens and things was. And there's going to be a lot of development there. I mean, I remember across the street from where Ballard Yards was Archie McPhee's. Things and changes hard. In change and transitions, there are always benefits and drawbacks. I remember along Market Street when FenPro closed, I think everyone in the neighborhood wondered if places like the Lock Spot and the Sloop Tavern would survive. Now we have Stone Gardens, Kiss Cafe, Habitude, and the new National Nordic Museum where FenPro used to be. And so there are really great opportunities that come when these changes occur. You asked about what I think and what I see the future of Ballard is. It's one that I see as walkable, bikeable, that there's access to transit that doesn't get stuck in traffic. And again, kind of to what Frank was saying, yes, after COVID, as long as the restaurants open, etc. I really want to see Ballard be a place that we can live, work, play, get a good education at school, and get a good job. My best days used to be the days I didn't leave Ballard. Now my best days are days that I don't leave District 6 in total. And the future that I see in Ballard is a community that people don't have to leave to have a full day. Getting groceries, social activity, and being able to access the waterfront. One of the things that I really appreciated about growing up in this neighborhood was only being a couple blocks away from the saltwater, only a couple blocks away from the freshwater, and being on a direct bus downtown. So those are my opening remarks, and I'd be happy to take any further questions.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess now you're an elected official representing Ballard and the district. So with regard to, I guess, thinking about the legislative office as the tool that you most centrally can wield now, how do you try to use that tool to achieve those goals? Like, what are some of the specific sort of notions that you have about how you might try to make it walkable, livable, less trafficy, et cetera?
Yeah, so, I've put forward the Cafe Streets proposal, which for Ballard Avenue, before COVID, really wanted Ballard Avenue pedestrianized in a way that allows people to use the public space and the public rights of ways in a manner that is a third place, that we all can come together and have human scale design. I oftentimes joke we have so many people in our city designing the user experience online, and we need to make sure that the user experience human in our neighborhood is also there. As far as what legislative tools that we have, there are incentive programs that we can put, that we've put downtown and in other places that allow developers to build higher or more dense buildings in exchange for improvements in the right of way. So if you could think of with the Ballard Yard, if the trail had not been built already in front of their building, they could have extra height if they improve, if they put money towards building a trail or a public space in front of their building. When we're looking at, Frank also brought up that their building was before mandatory housing affordability. And so the city has already gone through a large upzone process. So I don't really see that. Everyone can agree that there could be improvements in the program. But really what my role is right now is also providing that vision for what is the future of downtown Ballard. It's one that you can catch it. You don't have to check the bus schedule to catch a bus, and your bus doesn't get stuck in traffic because, I look at getting to light rail. You never know how long the 44 is going to take, mostly because you don't know if how much traffic it's going to get stuck in. It's also a place where bikes, anyone can feel safe riding an electric bike to and from where they want to go, because we will be seeing that technology improving and expanding beyond just bikes as well. So it's a place that we can live, walk, bike, ride transit, and for the folks that have to rely on their cars are still able to get through the downtown core and are still able to, especially I look at things in all ages and abilities. So whether it's a 3-year-old or an 88-year-old, that they're able to navigate the community way that matches their mobility capabilities. I just went to a friend at the park last night who's not much older than me and is actually very disabled at this point. I was kind of surprised to see him walk. And so it also reminds me it's not just people who are young and old that also need to be able to get around the community and that we all have different mobility abilities. So that's the future I see of Ballard.
Great. I'm sure I'm not the only one with interesting questions to ask. So I'm gonna funnel it off to Angie. You can unmute your mic, Angie, and then maybe you have some other questions from other folks. And let's see if I can put Frank and Bryan back on as well, because some questions may be directed their way.
That sounds great. I might jump back to the Aegis project and ask a couple questions there, just to loop back to the beginning of the presentation. Let me make sure we've got our speakers available still.
Turn Bryan on.
Are Bryan and Frank, you guys are both around? Great.
Yep.
Great. So one question that came in is that Aegis is also doing a project in Greenwood at Holman Road and 3rd Avenue. And someone was wondering how the Ballard project might be similar or different. Will you be similar kinds of people who will live there, different amenities? Is that anything you can describe a little bit?
Yeah, it'll be similar as far as the type of services and the residents that'll be living there. We like to be in the different neighborhoods just to serve. Most of our residents come from immediately surrounding the communities that we're building in. Okay. And so we like to be located in the various different neighborhoods. So it'll be very similar as far as the amount of amenities. As a matter of fact, I think that one is 96 units and this one's 93. So very similar.
Okay. Okay. Great. And then someone else was just generally wondering if you anticipate any delays because of the pandemic, whether that's around,
Yeah,
permitting.
we've already suffered a delay there. I thought we would be submitted for MUP about 4 months ago, and we just got our EDG approval in June 1st, so we're about 6 months behind schedule. I would say at this point, though, the city has figured out how to work in this pandemic, and they're actually really responsive and chugging along, I think, even faster than beforehand. So I'm looking forward to getting the MUP approved relatively quickly and building permits. So I think we're full speed ahead at this point.
That's great. And then how can people generally stay in tune with the project if they want to follow along? Are there still points
Sure.
to provide feedback?
Yeah, we have a website, aegisliving.com, and all of our new projects and our existing projects are on there. So you can look at new communities or existing communities, and that's the easiest way to follow along.
Yeah. Great. And one last one was, there was, the city announced a delay in the big repaving of Market Street between 15th and 24th, and your project is a little bit east of that. But does that impact your project at all, that's being delayed, or?
It shouldn't impact that. So we're another year away or so from construction, and our construction routes probably are going to be going more east than west in that. So.
Okay, great. I think that was all of our Aegis questions for right now. And then I have several that came in for Ballard Yards though. So Frank, let's see, the first one is a little bit long and I might just read parts of it out loud, but it's a neighbor who lives in a building across the street who's wondering a lot about noise and dust related to construction. So I'm just going to read a little bit of his phrasing, but that's the general category. So he says, I live across the street and would like to know more about the type of outreach that can be done with adjacent neighbors, what we can expect when it comes to noise and dust. Will there be a need to secure noise variances for any anticipated overnight construction work in the coming months? And also, has there been any environmental remediation work that was required or that will be undertaken, especially related to dust that might come out of the excavation work? And then the last part of his question was, if construction crews get an early morning start before the city's permitted start time, besides submitting noise complaints to the city, who could they talk to? Are there developers or construction managers that neighbors can reach out to if any issues come up?
Yeah, so a lot of questions there. I'll try to remember them all. The noise issue. First of all, we're not anticipating any work outside of the city's permitted work hours.
Okay.
And believe me, I've got 2 construction projects right next to where I live, so I get it. There's a lot of fatigue related to it. It's unavoidable to some extent. We can't build and be quiet at the same time, but we will certainly work within those time frames and do what we can to mitigate as much as we can, but still keep the project moving forward. We do, we have a project management office that's right behind, it's in the yellow building that the Nordic Heritage Museum owns, and we're renting space from them. So we have site management people there. We had a public number. We do, at least with the businesses, with the marine industrial people, we've been circulating sort of notices as to what our timeframes are. Certainly if there's going to be some event that could impact neighbors, either, if we end up having to do some work after hours or impede traffic any more than it's been impeded by the SDOT work or anything like that, we will notice the neighbors. And we've done that somewhat with the industrial people to make sure our schedules mix, because they have some peak periods of transportation and things. As far as the environmental impacts, so we remediated the building prior to taking it down. That's a requirement. So we do a hazardous materials study, as far as lead-based paint or asbestos, and that gets taken out before we take the building down. So that's been done, and now the building's gone, and I think most of the material is gone. There are other environmental issues that we've gone through all of the approvals and the research and have the plans in place to address those as we get into our earthwork. That's an industrial area. So, the expectation is you're going to run into something and you need to manage it correctly and in accordance with the state Department of Ecology and also some federal departments. So that's all in place, and we've got experts in those fields that are going to be managing that aspect of the job. So I don't know if that answered all of the questions.
Yeah, I think so. And it sounds like if neighbors have questions, they might be able to stop by that construction management office or look for a number posted there maybe.
Yep, absolutely. Josh is the project manager. Our door is open. We want to be transparent, and if there's an issue, we want to hear about it.
That's great. One of the other questions that came in was why so many 1-bedroom units and not more of a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom?
Well, I think that's a function of demographics and the way things are going just across the country these days. It's what's most in demand. Bryan deals more probably in the older population. Actually, yours are probably 1-bedroom units too, but there isn't as much demand for a 2-bedroom apartment. A lot of these are going to be single professionals. I don't know the age group, but a lot of them may be younger tech, type employees, and so that's what's in demand, and they're relatively small. So.
Okay. And then another question was for residents moving in there, how will you be mitigating industrial noise? There's already we get a lot of next door threads going and different Facebook threads, what's that noise when there's different industrial projects going on. So for people who are living there full time, so close to the industrial yards, how are you planning for the building design?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. That was one of the biggest concerns, obviously, from Pacific Fishermen, Ballard Oil, and those groups. So we upped the STC, or the sound transmission coefficient of the glazing on the south side. So we've got better windows, basically. So that was one thing above what would normally be required by code to address that. The other thing, we will have a number to call for our residents, and because I know with Doug and Warren, they've gotten visits by the police when they're doing some essential work after hours or something like that that's noisy, and rather than go through that route, have another mechanism for tenants to reach out and say, look, I can't stand it. Don't call police, call a management company, and let us see if we can resolve the situation short of having to have the police show up. So we recognize that's an ongoing and vital and important part of Ballard. We embrace that, and so we're not going to turn our back on it.
Great, thank you. And then I think our next questions are for Councilmember Strauss.
Thanks.
And one of them is, there's a large hotel project that's planned for the former Ballard Blossom site at 1766 Northwest Market Street. And I think the city has an administrative review scheduled for just a couple days from now on July 10th. And they had an early design review meeting in May. Some of these meetings, the format of them has changed because of the pandemic. Can you speak a little bit for a really large scale project like that that's right in the thick of things on Market Street? How can people stay in tune with what's going on and still provide feedback?
Yeah, so much like the question about did COVID change the project schedule for, I can't remember if it was for Aegis or Ballard Yards. The reason that their project schedule has not changed is because we passed a emergency permitting bill that allows these projects to continue, so that, because there's a lot of staff time work that is required to go into a project before you can actually start digging. And if that staff work gets delayed, then once we're out of COVID and we're ready to, go back to the new normal, we would have a lack of projects that are shovel ready. So there were a couple really important key parameters that I had when I was looking at that bill, and that's ensuring that there is a similar amount of public comment opportunity. And so there is only one fewer opportunities for public comment as compared to the typical design design guidance. And so there's the same amount, essentially the same amount of public input, and we put strong parameters around them getting their back to the way things used to be, so that design guidance would be able to occur in the same way that it did before COVID. Now, the really interesting aspect of this is that these design boards have a lot, they rely on a lot of volunteers and really technical plans. And so and then you have on top of that staff that are already stretched thin. So there's this component of, and I've had this experience working on city council, trying to do council meetings remotely. When you're trying to really dive deep into subject matter, it can be really difficult virtually. So that was part of that emergency permitting bill. So what SDCI has done is they're bringing on a new employee that would be specifically tasked with the technological aspects of these meetings, so that we can get the design guidance meetings back to the way that they were before COVID. And it was also really important that we kept the pipeline moving, so that we didn't find ourselves with a real backlog and a bow wake of projects that needed to move quickly, and so that we had projects that were shovel ready. And so you can still participate in administrative design review in very similar ways. And I believe, Noah, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that we received the report back from SDCI about their ability to bring back virtual meetings. I know that they are getting much closer than they have been previously. So things should revert back to a new normal soon, but still just remain engaged with the project number that you see and with that urban planner.
Thank you. The new normal is a good segue to the next question we received, and that is anyone in City Hall rethinking density? How are the lessons of the pandemic and social distancing inspiring our planners? Is there an assumption that things will revert to normal before long?
So I kind of touched on this earlier, and before I answer that question, I do just want to give a big thanks to Frank and the Ballard Yards project, the way that they are handling noise complaints to design to, I mean, having a company from out of state can be really difficult, and it's really meaningful to have somebody who's a local on that at the steering wheel. So just big thanks to Frank. I know your camera's off, but hopefully you can still hear me. So when we're looking at what is the new normal, when we are looking at urban space and density, we are looking at how do we use our public rights of way in different ways. So the stay healthy streets, those are really great examples of how we're repurposing public rights of way to allow people to walk and bike, because people are driving less and they are walking more. And we want to be able to see people eating outside in a physically distanced way, so that we can still enjoy those amenities of living in a dense neighborhood. We have not brought up the discussions of changing zoning per my earlier comments. We are really focused on what is that public space and how do we utilize it in ways that we previously had to just rely on car traffic moving through. Because we have less car traffic and we have a stronger desire to use our streets and our neighborhoods, there's really great opportunity that we didn't have before.
That's great. We have one other question. It isn't totally directly related to development, but it is related to how people get around. And that is, we've received a few different questions about pedestrian access over the locks. And I know that falls under federal jurisdiction, and I'm sure you've received a lot of feedback to your office, but especially for people living in the farther west part of Ballard, it's really cut off access to bike trails, to being able to walk to Magnolia and Discovery Park. And so wondering how can we, as long as the social distancing is going on, who can work with the Army Corps of Engineers to come up with protocols to reopen that in some way?
You know, whoever asked that question, I'm right there in that same boat with you.
Yeah.
I really wanted to go eat my lunch at the Locks the other day, and I had to drive around because there was no easy access across the locks. Now with the locks, there's a really big challenge, which is that the pathways over the locks themselves, the locking mechanisms are very narrow. And then additionally, the walkway that is over the breakwaters, I'm forgetting the actual technical name right now, spillways, the walkways over the spillways are very narrow. And so that is really the largest challenge when we are looking at how do we allow people to move back and forth. Additionally, because we have, we need to keep those locks operating, we do need to protect the workers who are there, making sure that marine traffic is still able to move through the space. When I'm looking, also something that hasn't been discussed here, and I haven't received a status update recently, is that the Burlington Northern Santa Fe bridge number 4 is one of the oldest drawbridges in Burlington Northern's network. It's also a pinch point north-south travel. So any trains going north have to go across that bridge. I used to live right at the locks, and so it was in my view from my bedroom. I really love that bridge, and it's going to be, again, a really emotional experience when we see it replaced, because Burlington Northern is planning on replacing that bridge. Now, every time I've had conversations with Burlington Northern, I've really advocated for creating an additional pedestrian overpass there so that we don't just have to rely on the locks. Now, we all know that the railroads have almost as much power as the federal government, so they've been resistant, but I'm still trying.
That's interesting. Yeah. They presented at Ballard District Council. I'm trying to remember the date. It was at least a year and a half ago or so, maybe a little bit longer. And one of our members touched base with them again, and we don't have any updates. At the time, they had said it would be at least a 5-year planning process for that bridge. And I don't think there's any public website or public information the last time we checked. So
yeah, I haven't heard anything more since they were doing their test drilling maybe about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
But I'll have my office check back in and see what information we can share with you.
That's great. Well, I think we're running a little past 8 o'clock. So Brent, I'll hand back to you. Do we have Brent Lackey there still?
Yeah, just give me a sec to
There
click
we go.
buttons. I've been clicking buttons all day. I'm getting a little slower, I guess, by this hour. Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you, Brian and Frank, who unclicked off already, but who I think are still with us. Been very helpful. Appreciate your time, Dan. As I mentioned at the outset of this meeting, I think we'll try to get folks from some of these other developments. As we kind of referred to, there's a big hotel going in where Ballard Blossom was. There's also a project called the Ballard Hub that's currently proposed. That's, I believe, a 7 or 8 story building, not just where the FedEx building is on Market, but at the same address immediately behind it on 56 is another one. That's going to be all part of the Ballard Hub. So that's another like 200 to 400 units of housing. There's also another project going in straight across the street from the Aegis Living Building down on the north side of Market right off 11th. There's also the Firestone so-called building where the Firestone Tire Store is now. Another large building right down there on the corner of 14th and Market, and again straight across the street from it on 14th and Market, or on the north side where the paint shop has been most recently. So
that's all not to mention Sound Transit will eventually be here.
Yeah, exactly. Which you can't get her too soon if we're going to have all those thousands of young people trying to get to their jobs downtown. But we'll keep trying to track the development stuff and bring that as a specific piece of what Ballard District Council tries to get connection from the neighborhoods to folks who are doing it. And we'll keep trying to tap in with you, Dan. Appreciate you taking the time tonight. Angie, thanks for playing hostess for all the questions. And everyone can watch this again on our YouTube channel. Click on a link, ballarddistrict.org. We'll get you to any of that information, and we can try and filter any follow-up questions for any of the presenters via info@ballarddistrict.org email site as well. We normally take a recess in August. We normally have an ice cream social actually at the end of this meeting. in July, but not just because it hasn't quite been super hot summer yet here in wonderful Ballard, but just also because we can't have ice cream across the internet. We're skipping that. We may decide to try and unrecess in August, since people aren't going to be gone as much as they often are, but certainly we will see you back by September for another meeting of the Ballard District Council. Thank you all, and that does it for tonight.
Thanks, Angie. Thanks, Brent.
Thank you.
You
Good
bet,
night.
Dan. Bye now.